How to plan your funeral. Welcome to Mark and Pete Live. I'm Pete the clergyman. With me as ever is Mark the businessman. So what's this all about then, Mark? What we're looking at this week? Something to do with funeral plans, eh? There's a lot of them
Well, yes,
about.
indeed. Clergyman Pete, funerals are big business. It does seem that many people have to put aside a lot of money to plan for their inevitability, which is, of course, a funeral. However, there's some concerns because from the 29th of July, any provider must be authorized and regulated by the FCA. That's the Financial Conduct Authority. And what this will do is it will give consumers far greater protection than they've ever had before. But there are some big concerns, Clergyman Pete, because this could mean that some of those firms, those funeral organizers, will go bust. Are we in a situation where it's a dying profession? Death is inevitable, of which there is no denying, and planning a funeral can be mortifying. But when the cost of living is killing what you're buying, avoiding being buried in debt is satisfying. Clergyman
Yes.
Pete, I ask you, have you been planning your funeral yet?
I have to admit that I have made no provision for my own funeral. And
Oh
although I'm,
dear.
of course, extremely elderly at 57 years old, I'm not
Going on
quite
97.
not quite ready to shuffle off this mortal coil yet. But I guess there is the idea, certainly in the funeral industry, that if you can have a package bought in advance, then then you can get a better deal. Although, of course, what that does mean is that you're tied in to using that particular firm, which may not be appropriate in the quarter of a century later.
Yes.
Then you might actually die. So there's an interesting push, isn't there? A real strong push. I've observed lots and lots of adverts out for funeral plans. This is where
Correct.
you, in advance, pay for
Yes.
things like the casket, the cars, and the clergyman who's going to take the funeral. It's all paid for in advance, which it seems like a good idea, but as I say, it is tying people in when they may not need to be.
Well, I think the point here is that every individual has an opportunity to design their funeral plans in a way that suits them. It's not necessarily a one fits all. But here's the point that many people possibly have left it too late, in the sense that when something happens, either unplanned or not, and you die, it could be that you're not covered. And some people could find that the spend of a funeral could end up being many, many thousands of pounds. So, what some organizations have done, and they've come in to basically offer what is perceived to be a good package deal, where essentially you can have everything all sorted for you in a way that becomes far more efficient. It's essentially cutting out things like the wake and many other different things. But the regulators believe that the consumer should be protected. If some of these businesses do go bust, it could mean that some of those people who've invested a lot of money may not get their money back. Now, Clergyman Pete, I
Mm.
do ask you, and I just wanted to just double check in terms of what sort of costs and values that people are actually spending. So what do you think, just in the UK alone? I mean, obviously there are different type of costs in America and in Europe and other places, but let's take the UK. What is the average plan for a funeral?
Well, I mean, as a clergyman, of course, I operate from the other end of this, in that a proportion gets paid to the church, not to me personally. I have to say I don't get any money out of it, but it depends. If it's just in a crematorium, it's about £200. It can be up to £400 with
Mm.
a service in church, etc. as well. So you've already got that in it. But I would say a funeral is going to cost, say, 5 or 6 thousand.
Well, it's not far off. It's actually the average plan is around £4,000.
Right.
Now, how many funeral plans, just the funeral plans, are taken out every year?
How many funeral plans are taken? I
Yes.
don't know. I would say, 10,000, 20,000, 20,000. I'll say.
Hmm. Well, this is where the rub comes. It's 200,000 funeral plans,
Whoa, well
which
above that.
means that's big
Yeah,
business.
yeah.
Now, the
Suddenly it's
average
big business.
plan,
Yeah.
The average plan lasts for about 8 years. Now, the thing here is that by implementing regulation, we're all for regulation, no problem at all. But here's my point, and this is why the purpose of this show is it's about planning your funeral. What I think is crucial here is to think about the legislation and what the impact will be on the companies who won't meet the standards. Similarly, again, is it's always good to have a plan. Now, what do? You have to decide what you want. If you want a complete carnival, if you want Clergyman Pete to do your funeral,
Yeah.
if you want many other things and showboats, then it's going to cost you a lot of money. You better start putting that together. But if you want to keep it really, really simple, you can take out insurance plans, which can be very cost effective. The thing here is avoid anything which is immediate and sudden. And what I would say is that go to your current provider and ask them about the regulation. Because if they are going to be impacted by this, you need to think about your payment plan and what does that mean? Is your payment plan transferable? Is it something that actually does still meet your needs? Because let's be honest, as we get older, our thoughts change. So I would want to ask you, Clergyman Pete, it's an emotional time. So I want to ask about not just the financial side, because it tends to be a little bit too sort of clinical and mercenary. Let's talk about the emotional side. What do you think that people should be thinking about in terms of planning a funeral?
Well, I think when you're planning a funeral, you need to have in mind that yes, it is an emotional time, but you've got to be practical about things. Don't necessarily have a horse and cart or a complete phalanx of stormtroopers
Mm.
necessarily. No, I say that because both those were arranged at funerals that I've done. At one
Oh,
was
really?
Star Wars,
Okay.
and other people do like to have the horse and cart. What you really want is something. I would say, just generally, this is true. So a funeral, what you want is something where there's enough space to breathe. So you keep it simple. Keep it so that there's not things. There aren't things that are going to go wrong. Uh, just take the pressure out. No matter how much emotion you think, I want to do this extra thing. Just keep it nice and simple, and then you'll have the time to reflect. It's really the emotional and mental side of it that are more important, and it doesn't really matter that much. The minutiae of what's going on around. Although one of the most effective things that people find in terms of having release is having those doves. People have doves and let them go at the grave, and that can be quite effective. But that's one more thing that can go wrong. So that's
Yeah.
my one piece of advice: keep it simple,
Well,
and don't put too much into a funeral service, because you need there to be enough time so you're never rushed.
yes. Now, a government spokesperson said on this matter, bringing prepaid funeral plans into regulation will protect consumers from bad practice within the sector, including by exposing any unsustainable business models and preventing problems from getting worse and impacting more consumers. So, yes, buyer beware, because at the end of the day, this is not something that just affects you because you need to make sure that you're getting what you want, but also you're not leaving the burden on others when you're gone. That's my thought. So,
Yes,
how would
it's
you close out, Clergyman Pete, on this matter to sort of give people a sense of positivity about something which can be a gloomy subject?
well, the thing is about a funeral is that it can be a good time of closure. I mean, that someone dying isn't good, but that doesn't mean that the funeral can't be. And a funeral can be good in that it's a time of release. If it's a time when you can allow people to cry, uh, but also have the time for people to enjoy their time together, because often it's a time of coming together of a family. Then the funeral itself can be overall a positive experience. And the time and time again, I get letters, people contacting me after the event and say how much they enjoyed a funeral. Yes. So it's one of those things. You think it's going to be terrible, but for most clergy, in fact, it's one of the most rewarding parts of their job. But it's time to say goodbye. See you next time.